Hi, everyone. My name is Shauna Mahajan, and I am a senior social scientist in WWF's Global Science team. I also serve as the social science lead for the Coral Reef Rescue Initiative. And today I'll be talking to you about a draft monitoring and evaluation vision that's been developed for the initiative. So as you all know, the Coral Reef Rescue Initiative is setting out to implement a very ambitious agenda to protect coral reefs and reef-dependent communities around the world. And achieving this vision will involve likely different tactics and approaches that will inevitably evolve in different ways across the different geographies in which we work. And this will require a truly adaptive approach for implementation. And for those who have worked in conservation, the idea of working within an adaptive management cycle or loop is not new. What is new when it comes to this vision is how fast we might move through these cycles of kind of understanding the nature of a problem, deciding on a vision and how we might go about solving that problem, and learning our way forward. All too often in traditional programs, we tend to kind of wait till the end of the project or wait until our donors ask to do that learning, to understand if what we did had an impact. And our vision is proposing that we work in a much more adaptive way and try to weave information that is generated through a monitoring and evaluation system into the day-to-day decisions that we make about the initiative. This might help us make small or maybe even large adjustments in our project plans and strategies as we go along. And this means going through these loops much more quickly. And so this kind of implementation, this more learning by doing, will likely involve taking what we say the road less traveled. And while very exciting and rewarding, it's not always easy. So really taking the time to learn and adjust and adapt often requires having sometimes really difficult conversations with ourselves about what we're doing, with our partners, and with our donors. And it might even involve working against some of the systems that we operate within and or challenging some of the more traditional ways that we do things. So all that said, we've developed this vision very much as a proposal. It's been developed based on numerous conversations that we've had over the last year and is still very much high level. It's organized sort of in a question and answer format. And it's meant to really prompt thinking about what we want this system to really look like. And as I go through presenting this vision, it'd be great if you could keep in the back of your mind the idea of a more pragmatic vision. So what I'm sharing with you today is very much kind of a gold standard or a vision of a good evaluation system. But successfully implementing such a system really requires commitment, and this includes financial resources and capacity. And so while I think we can and should be visionary, it's important to keep in mind both what is realistic and pragmatic, as well as what we really want to do. Because we need to be able to implement whatever system that we developed to make sure that our monitoring and evaluation system can really service our goals. So first question, what kind of information can this monitoring and evaluation system compile? So we've recognized that we need information that can help us make better decisions. And making better decisions happens on all scales of the initiative. That could be at the community field level, or at the national level, or even at the international level. We've also recognized that the information that we collect must be diverse. So we recognize that the social outcomes of our work are just as important as the ecological outcomes, and information on the governance systems that we're often trying to change through our work. All this information, it's really important that it's compiled and communicated together. So we don't have just the social scientists talking about their outcomes and impacts in a different place from those who are thinking more about the ecological impacts. And finally, it's important that this information compiles what information is feasible. So we often get really ambitious when we talk about global monitoring systems, but we recognize that it's important that whatever is developed at a high level should really be in a way that services discrete decision needs. And that might mean more light touch information being collected across the global portfolio. And second question, what will our system help us do? So we often think about the system as helping us service three discrete goals. So the first goal is really understanding broader changes in the system or changes in the world. This might be how ecological health is changing over time, how reef health is changing over time, or how community health is changing over time. The second component is really how this global system is responding to our actions. So it might be doing impact evaluation in a particular place and understanding the actual outcome of a particular action, or understanding what happened after we helped instigate a policy change. And then finally, when we kind of think more about the pragmatic side, we really do need to be mindful about what our donors need to know. And we often refer to this as the monitoring that we do for accountability. So holding ourselves accountable to what we said that we would do and really communicating that to those who support our work. And at the end of the day, we really want to make sure that this system helps deliver useful information to our partners, to our donors, and to our stakeholders in timely fashions. It's very common that we end up developing these really informative systems, but it takes us years to get the information that we need. So in this system, we're envisioning a more real-time approach to collecting, synthesizing, and using information. So next question, how will it work? So one shift that we've really taken with this vision is putting the how we use the information front and center. So we envision that this system will help facilitate what we call evidence-based reflection sessions, potentially annually or even more, where we convene the right people at the right time in the right places to kind of grapple with, reflect on the evidence that we developed, and then use that in making whatever decisions are facing that particular place and a particular time. We also want to make sure that this system is really aligned with other efforts that are going on. And this might be monitoring and evaluation efforts within our own institutions or with our partners, be they the NGO partners or the government partners or the community partners. And finally, we've been envisioning this system as taking what we've called a mosaic approach. So potentially doing some deep dives in certain places, really answering questions that are of particular need to our place and a set of people, and then maybe doing lighter touch monitoring across the broad system that again is servicing really discrete decision needs. And last question is, who will be involved in creating and using this system? So it's really important that monitoring and evaluation systems do not remain solely in the domain of our monitoring and evaluation officers. It's important that all the partners involved in implementing this initiative have sort of shared ownership, especially over that systems level monitoring system. We may have bits and pieces of the monitoring system that's very particular to certain groups of people and certain decisions, but for that broad kind of understanding change in the world, it's really important that that shared system exists and is co-owned. At the same time, pragmatically, we really do need to have point people that help coordinate and keep the system running and functioning and serving its purpose. So we envision maybe an international lead and national leads. And then finally, it'll be really important to achieve that goal around real-time data, to work closely with our technology partners to help us design appropriate systems and tools that help visualize information that's really attuned to the different decision needs that are in the initiative. So how might we start taking this vision to reality? So we've sketched out kind of broad 5 phases that we see for implementing this vision, recognizing that some of these phases happen simultaneously and some are really complementary to one another. So I'll talk through really briefly these 5 phases. It's important to note that this is, again, very visionary at this moment. This is really just getting us thinking about what this stuff might look like in practice. So phase 1, understanding what's out there. So we all know that there are many really amazing coral reef monitoring systems that already exist, tracking maybe social or ecological or governance issues, be it on small scales or large scales. So we really want to take the time to look at what's out there, learn from them. So as we start to develop the system that's particular to this initiative, we know what we can kind of build with, work with, and also start thinking about the people and the institutions that we might want to work more closely with as we go forward. We also really want to learn from systems that might be quite different from what we're used to encountering. So maybe not even conservation monitoring systems, and see what lessons we can take forward. So phase 2, and this I have already said many times throughout this presentation, and we'll keep saying again, it's so important to be user focused and understanding the information needs across the initiative. So in this phase, we'd have 2 main goals. And first is really understanding the kind of blend of information, so all different types of information that are needed to inform decision making at different project scales. That can be all the way from the community up to the international. We also really want to understand the effective ways that information might be delivered across these different scales. And the second is more about how we go about doing that, understanding those needs, and then implementing the system. So we've learned through different monitoring and evaluation efforts that it is really important to kind of co-develop these systems with the people that we hope will use the systems. And doing that really takes time and investment. So this phase already needs to be underway now. It already is underway now, where we kind of engage with the people who we think will need this information the most. So by the end of this phase, we hope to have sort of an initial pulse on the information needs in the initiative and a sense of what products we might be striving towards creating to ensure that the information is not only used in decision making by the initiative, but also has relevance to maybe the extended community of practice in the coral reef conservation community. So phase 3, using the theory of change to help identify our project measures. So early on, I spoke a little bit about the idea of having sort of project-specific measures and systems measures. And these things are sometimes one and the same. You know, we might be measuring an ecological outcome that relates to an action and is also tracking a broader change in a system. But we separate them out to make sure that we're really capturing those different aspects of change in the world. And as we develop these more kind of project-focused indicators, we might be measuring things like outputs or outcomes. We might use different types of qualitative or quantitative information and really understand how the actions that we take are making change in the world. And it's important to note that these measures might actually shift over the course of the project. We might not be measuring the same project measures at the very start than we do at the end. And finally, it's important to note that we can't measure everything. It's often that in monitoring and evaluation efforts, we create really long lists of indicators of everything that we can track. This often ends up getting the conversation much more focused on the things we might measure as opposed to the decisions that we might make. So moving on to phase 4, again, very linked with phase 3, thinking a little bit more about that broader systems level monitoring. And I've put up a couple of examples, some coral reef, some not, of tools that already exist that help track those kind of broader context, changes in the world. We really want to be developing these tools in close partnership with not only our scientific partners, but also some of our implementing partners to ensure that we all have kind of this shared ownership of what we think is important in the world that we should be tracking relevant to this initiative. And that kind of shared system of measurement has been proven to help improve collective decision-making and collective action around different issue areas. And then finally, again, I mentioned that these phases really blend into one another. Phase 5 is really about how we use the information. And this requires sort of commitment on all levels. It requires the adaptive mindset of the whole initiative team, but also really the initiative team members. And this also involves ensuring that the reports that we produce are always really tailored to key stakeholders, to partners and donors. And kind of going back again to that idea of an adaptive mindset, we need to be more comfortable with uncertainty and also prepared to adapt and change course when we need to based on the information that comes out. So just to wrap up this implementation discussion, this is one of my favorite quotes that reminds us again always, we may develop a system that compiles the best information in the world. But all of that will be worth very little if we don't use that information. And sometimes using that information means going in directions that we never could have imagined that we would go in. So that adaptability is really key. So finally, to conclude, these are some of my favorite pragmatic tips around monitoring and evaluation. It's really important as we start to develop this system to think through roles and responsibilities, who's responsible for what. Part of that involves being really clear around data. Data sharing agreements often take lots of time to agree on and put in place. And we always, as we're developing agreements around data, we need to make sure that we keep in mind things that will help incentivize the sharing of knowledge and data, while at the same time really respecting the contributions and ownership around data, especially the people who produce and synthesize data. Saying it one last time, the importance of being user-focused, staying focused on who needs what information, when, and why. And again, that indicator rabbit hole. So being careful not to go too far down, creating long lists of measures, and being really, really focused on what information is needed and for what purpose. And finally, a good rule of thumb is often that a M&E budget comprises about at least 5% of a total project budget. It really requires time and effort to implement these systems well. And so with that, I'll close, just leaving you with some references for what has influenced this vision that I spoke about today. And as I said in the beginning, this is very much a draft vision meant to prompt discussion, the sharing of ideas, and thinking through what actually goes in these phases of implementation. So please do reach out with your comments, your questions, your ideas. My email address is listed here. Well, thank you very much.